Sean Hook's Newsmaker Saturday starts now.
Thanks for joining us for Newsmaker Saturday. We're going to talk about what the government's limits are when it comes to forcing you potentially to get a COVID vaccine or wear a mask. That's coming up later in the program. But we're going to begin with the situation in America concerning the spending right now as we prepare to spend trillions more potentially on government programs. I want to take you to the national debt clock just to get a little sense of where we are right now. 28 trillion and climbing, almost to 28 trillion and a half. The number's unbelievable. That means that every single person in America would owe $86,000. That's where we are right now, and the number's growing, and it's been growing incredibly here in the last 4 or 5 years. We're going to talk about this with Fox Business anchor Charles Payne. He is the host of Fox's Making Money with Charles Payne, best-selling author as well. Be smart, act fast, get rich. Your game plan for getting it right in the stock market. Charles, pleasure to have you on the program.
It's great to be here.
Charles, John McCain, our old senator, used to say, we are spending money like a drunken sailor, and he knew a thing or two about that, and I mean that with all respect. There seems to be no limit on what government's willing to spend right now.
Yeah. You know, of course, the thing is, drunken sailors earned their money, so they wanted to spend it that way. That was their prerogative. Right. We're talking about money that no one's earned and everyone owes. And so we're going to have shared misery when it's all said and done. It's really amazing. And this, in your intro, you talked about the last 4 or 5 years, but this has been going on, really, this big spike for more than a decade. Listen, last year we were in an emergency situation. They made us stop working. We kind of had to do certain things that we didn't want to do. But where we're going right now, it's not even about economics, to be quite frank. I know we talk about it in economic terms because the numbers are huge and they try to present it in economic terms. But what we're really talking about, and just a couple of weeks ago, President Biden reiterated this, it's fundamentally changing America. Changing us from a nation, a sort of pull yourselves up by the bootstrap nation that believes anything and everything is possible, and you create the backdrop so that everyone who thinks that way has a chance to make it come to fruition. Essentially, we're saying, no, we don't do that. We can't see that happening anymore. So we've hit our peak. Let's divvy up the spoils, and let's create this giant social welfare place where now, because there's no opportunity, because people can't pull themselves up by the bootstrap, at least we'll take care of them. Now, maybe in the minds of the people behind this, the authors behind this, it seems noble. It seems like the right thing to do. But I got to tell you right now, if you think about all the great new things out in this world, all the great companies, the new innovations, we're in the 4th Industrial Revolution. The vast majority emanate from this country. Last year, we had a boom in entrepreneurship. Yes, you can still pull yourself up by the bootstraps, but not if you owe 30 trillion, 35 trillion, not if you have onerous taxes. But that's what a lot of folks want to see. A lot of people in power right now want to see us with a greater social welfare state, which is going to discourage work. It's going to tax people who do achieve, and that's going to discourage achievement. So I'm really concerned about it. I'm not sure when we hit that cliff. I can tell you right now, though, we're really a lot closer to it than we want to be right now.
You've talked about the balance sheets of the typical American family, that these balance sheets are in pretty good shape right now. Is that correct?
They have never been better. They have never been better. Last year, there was so much money sent out by the federal government. This year, we had another $1.9 trillion plan. Even before then, though, household balance sheets have come down a lot since the Great Recession. So if you take disposable income versus your monthly bills, we've never been better as a nation. Corporate America's coffers are brimming with cash, just brimming with cash. Almost every single day I see another company raise their dividend or buy back stock. We've got 11 million job openings. We came into this year as a country that was turning into an economic juggernaut. The notion that we need to spend this kind of money and the notion that we need to raise taxes at the same time are really misleading.
Okay, on the political question, if the Democrats were to get something through, even scaled down, and scaled down now sounds like $2 trillion, that's still a lot of money on top of probably getting something done on infrastructure. That's 1.5.
Right.
The latest money I can figure is we've spent about $6 trillion. I think we maybe have $2 trillion to pay for it in revenues. It's going to be a huge shortfall. What's the best argument for doing this that you can come up with? Is there any reasonable argument to do this?
If I was playing devil's advocate, I would say, listen, we don't want the momentum to stall. We had to shut down the economy a few times, even a lot of restrictions this year. So you see, even now, where estimates for third quarter growth have gone from 6% to 1%.
Why is that, Charles,
maybe
by the way?
let's get a booster shot before we need it.
Why did that growth estimate go down so sharply?
A few things. The impact of the supply chain issues, the inability to get products here means that those are lost opportunities. Inflation, probably the biggest reason. It's become insidious. Everyone watching understands and sees gasoline prices. So those are really your two main issues because the demand is there. But the inflation, this year, people are getting more money in their paychecks. But unfortunately, when you look at it from a realistic point of view, almost every single month, people have actually made less. So you get a fatter paycheck than you did 2 months ago. You go into the store, you actually come out with fewer bags. So this inflation situation is also obviously pretty bad. So that's the reason. We've had just a series of worries. We just can't get products, and then you wonder, will demand linger? So if I was playing devil's advocate, I'd say, well, let's give them another shot in the arm, just no pun intended, right, in this era of COVID and booster shots, but let's just be preemptive, if you will. So that's the way they would sell it. Now, the way they are selling it, I think, is a mistake. That this is sort of an uncaring country where trillionaires, we don't have any, but we've heard that trillionaires, billionaires, and millionaires. And by the way, that bothers me so much when they lump in a millionaire with a billionaire. There's a distinct difference between someone who's worth $2 million. They started a plumbing company. They're trying to buy their seventh truck. They've got 32 employees. And Jeff Bezos. We always hear about Jeff Bezos, but the person that pays the brunt of these taxes, the brunt of these regulations, is that person who wants to keep moving up. And that's what really bothers me. So it's being sold that we're an uncaring nation and that we need to do more. We need to do more to help the folks who can't get up there. But I can tell you right now, we got 11 million jobs open. We can get up there. People can climb that ladder. Now, if you start to pay me not to work, and at the same time you tell me that they don't want me anyway, I'll stay home and eat a bowl of Fruit Loops all day long because that's what you're telling me I should do.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Charles, you are uniquely positioned to talk about this. I want to get personal here for a minute, a little bit about your story. You grew up in Harlem. How did you end up coming to this kind of mindset about self-determination?
Right. I had two childhoods. Now, my first childhood was on Army bases. My father was a career military man, fought in Vietnam, and so we moved every single year. In fact, I was born in New York. My brother was Pittsburgh, then Texas, then Germany, back to Pittsburgh, Japan, Texas, Alabama, North Carolina, Virginia. So we're at home one day in Virginia, 2-story house on an Army base, idyllic, beautiful, never lock the doors, go outside, ride your bike, come home, make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, go back outside and ride your bike. It was just an amazing life. It was just unbelievably amazing. My mom, one day I came home from school, my mom said, we're leaving. So me, my two brothers, and my mom, we get on a bus, a Greyhound bus, or it might have been Trailways, and we leave this amazing life. And we take this bus and we go to Harlem. This is in the early 70s. It was the poorest, most dangerous neighborhood in America. All four of us live in a room. I'd never seen that kind of violence before. I'd never seen that kind of hopelessness before. By the same token, I never saw that kind of energy either. It was just amazing in so many different ways. But I was the oldest. And up to that point, we had everything. Now we had nothing. So I had to work. And the first thing I did is I would clean windows at stoplights and stop signs and red lights. And I'd buy a pack of paper towels and Windex. I would pack bags at the supermarket. I ended up getting a job at a bodega. Whatever it was, I would come home and just pour all the money in the bed and give it to my mom. So at that point, I said, I got to do something. I got to figure this out. And we all think about, when we think about really big money, even back in the early 70s, you equate big money with Wall Street. So I said, I got to figure this out. So I started reading the Wall Street Journal, and I got to tell you, this thing was hard as heck. Anyone who knows, in the 1970s, it was all these tables and little numbers, and it took me a long time to figure this thing out. It took me a long time, but when I was 14 years old, I told my mom, I'm going to work on Wall Street.
And you did.
So I bought my first mutual fund when I was, I did. Bought my first mutual fund at 17. She had the cosign. I bought my first stock at 18 years old. I started my own business. I have my own stock market research business now for over 3 decades. So, I had to do it.
Charles, I almost think when we go down this road, it's almost demeaning when I say, well, here's Charles Payne and he made it. Why should we say that that's some kind of exception, that Charles Payne made it? It's almost demeaning to say that.
Yeah, I don't think you have to say it's an exception. I think when I talk to people, I want them to look at me and know that if I did it, they can do it. It's like, but you got to put in the work, you got to believe, and you've got to. I mean, I do have some things I think that do help me a lot. And I will be honest with you, not being born and raised in Harlem gave me an edge. When I was in 3rd grade, I had a math teacher. And she used to make the 2 students stand up at the same time. And she would ask a math question. And whoever got it right would continue to stand, and the other person would sit, and another person would stand. I used to wipe out the class every time. Wipe them out. I beat them all the time. So, her husband was in the military, and he got his orders to leave. So she came into the class, and it was her last day, and she asked me to stand up. And she told everyone there that I was the best student she ever had. And what was special about that is that the class was about 95% white. So I never grew up thinking that, white people were inherently smarter than me. I never grew up feeling inferior. I grew up on army bases, which, to be quite frank with you, in the 60s and 70s masked a lot of the racial stuff that was going on outside of army bases. So I did have that distinct advantage. There's no doubt about that. But one of the reasons I'm sort of a Pied Piper for everyone watching, no matter who you are, that you can change your life is because I've done it. And I do it primarily through hard work and commitment and a belief. You got to believe it, I think, but if you put in the elbow grease, you stay aware, always be inquisitive, I think anyone can do it.
Charles Payne, it's great to see you. Thank you. We got a little social
Thanks
there.
a lot.
We got into the economics, and I appreciate it. It's great hearing the backstory. We watch you every day, so Charles Payne, continued success. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Good to see you, Charles. Thanks. When we come back on Newsmaker Saturday, what can the government do when it comes to vaccines, wearing masks? How much power do they actually have over you? We're going to talk about that with an employment attorney next on Newsmaker Saturday. Welcome back on Newsmaker Saturday. What can the government do? What are the limits when it comes to forcing you to take a vaccine, forcing you to wear a mask? What can your employer do on that regard? We're going to talk about this over the next few minutes with employment attorney Robert Sewell. He's also a litigation expert, and he's got his own podcast on the subject. Thank you, Robert, for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, long and short of it, President Biden put out a pretty sweeping plan aimed at battling COVID, mandating vaccinations for employees of companies that have more than 100 workers. Is that even legal for the federal government to mandate what private companies do?
Well, I mean, that's an open question, actually, and it's a fascinating question. Generally speaking, the federal government doesn't mandate vaccines. They don't do that. That happens at the local level. The states and the local levels, they are mandating vaccines. And those types of mandates have been upheld as long as they're reasonable many, many times. But right now, what Biden is doing is interesting because he's trying to use OSHA to mandate the vaccine That's an open question. We haven't ever gone down this road before.
So given the makeup of this court right now, which has swung to a more conservative direction, I think that's probably without doubt right now. What is that court? How would they view this stuff, do you think?
Wow, that's going to be a tough question. Certainly the vaccine, certainly COVID-19 is a serious issue, right? And there are people who are dying from COVID-19. So, but what we have here is a emergency situation. Maybe not. That's what Biden is trying to say. He's trying to use his emergency powers, his emergency rulemaking powers, to force the employers to force their employees to get vaccinated. And, you know, we've been going along down this road a long time now, you know, since the COVID started, and we haven't, is that making it an emergency year and a half, 2 years later? I don't know. I don't know if that's going to pass muster. Yeah,
this is and the interesting question, and I'm on both sides of this because I've done it all. I've had COVID, I've been vaccinated, Johnson & Johnson. My question has always been on this: when data is emerging that natural immunity from COVID is pretty strong, maybe better than getting the vaccine, at least according to the Israeli data. How can you force somebody who's had COVID to then get a vaccine when they say, I'm already vaccinated the old-fashioned way, I had COVID? How do you navigate those waters?
Biden is going to have to be very careful in his rulemaking. That's how he's going to have to do it. Otherwise, he's going to be having those issues in court. Those issues will be raised. Is it over-inclusive? In ways it could be over-inclusive is you're having people who are not at risk being vaccinated. That could happen. And perhaps there's a good argument scientifically, and maybe they'll be making those arguments in court, that if you've had COVID, you don't need the vaccine. I don't know what those arguments are going to be yet, but I could see that as an argument. The other argument could be it's under-inclusive, that this rulemaking isn't really helping the situation, that you're only addressing employers with more than 100 employees. Is that enough? And then you have the other mandate, the testing, the alternative. You're testing weekly. Well, is that really helping? There's 160-something hours of work week, and you have all these different schemes where people are coming in the afternoons or the mornings, depending on your type of job. Is that going to be enough? Is it really addressing the problem? Yeah. All those types of things are going to be borne out in the courtroom with experts in the field to say whether or not it's addressing the problem, if there is a true emergency, and if there's really something that's going to be addressed by the rulemaking. Can
you explain the difference? Because a lot of people bring this up. Schools require kids to be vaccinated, but it is not an absolute. There is a difference. Parents can object and say, no, on moral grounds, we're not going to do it. And they get in. They still go to school. Even if the school says they require it, there are a lot of exceptions out there. That's going on all the time. How is that different than what we're talking about now with COVID vaccines and what the government wants to do and what maybe your employer wants you to do, or a school?
Okay, so when we're talking about vaccines at a local level, the government, the state governments, the local governments can mandate that they have the vaccine. That can happen.
This gets back to federalism,
allow for
right?
exceptions.
This is federalism. This is getting back to states' rights, local control. It's not a federal thing, but if a local entity wants to do it, they have a lot more latitude, right?
Right, they do, and they need to. But they need to allow for exceptions, religious exceptions. Do I have a sincerely held religious belief that would prevent me from getting a vaccine? If I have that, yeah, I'm going to be fit into an exception. Similarly, if I have a medical condition I'm going to be fit into that exception too. There are some people that should not receive vaccines, but you have to show that you have that condition. So once I have made that showing, then the schools will typically let me in. And again, it's a local issue.
Yeah.
These local issues will be decided at the local level. But that's different from the federal government trying to say that you need a vaccine. They will have to, the federal government, if they did, they will have to allow for religious exceptions and exceptions for people to who have genuine health concerns about receiving a vaccine. It's not appropriate for all. It's appropriate for most, but it's not appropriate for all.
Have we ever been down this road where the government has mandated that someone take a medicine? Has that? I'm trying to think if we've ever had this.
Well, certainly we've been down this road for vaccines many times. But again, it typically happens at the local level, that the state and the local level. My favorite case is Jacobson versus Massachusetts. Fascinating case.
Yeah, 1905, right?
What'd you say?
1905.
1905, fascinating case. There's a smallpox epidemic, and they had an effective vaccine out there. And, Mr. Jacobson, he was a pastor, and he wanted to avoid the vaccine. He said he had a negative reaction to the vaccine, but it was generally an argument of my body, my choice.
Right.
And the Supreme Court, it went up to the Supreme Court. Jacobson argued he had constitutional rights not to take this vaccine. And the Supreme Court said, no, you don't. You really don't. And part of their reasoning was that when we're in an emergency situation, your own individual needs need to give way to the needs of the society as a whole. That's what Jacobson really came down to. That you needed to have folks give way in their own individual needs. They, of course, said it much more eloquently. The other thing that was sort of interesting about Jacobson was Jacobson had a choice. He could simply just take the fine. The fine was $5, which is equivalent to $155 today's money.
Right.
So Jacobson could have just said, give me the fine and I'll not be vaccinated.
Right.
That was okay, too.
But this is exactly, that case illustrates where we are right now. There's the kind of the public well-being versus the individual right. And they're colliding right now in a big way. Yet I do think on a federal level, that's going to be a heavy lift to have a federal pressure to say, you've got to get this. I don't know where that seems like that's a heavy lift to me.
Yeah. Oh, I don't disagree with you that it's a fascinating upcoming case. It will be challenged. But these emergency rulemaking powers have been used very rarely. I understand that they've been used 10 times, and they've been challenged of just a few times. I understand that of 6 challenges, only one of the emergency rules made it through. And the chemical was like a cancer-causing element, and if you were exposed to the chemical, you could get cancer. So, I mean, that was pretty. And we're gonna watch this with interest, and I hope you'll come back and join us again. Robert Sewell, employment attorney, he's got a podcast on the subject about this vaccine and mask mandates. Thank you. Is that even legal? Is the podcast? Yeah, thank you. We appreciate your time, Robert. Good to see you. Thank you. All right, as we go to break, people talk all the time when they talk about the show. They say, where can I get a prior program? And we've got a lot of great content. This is where you can find it, fox10phoenix.com/newsmaker. And we will be back in a moment on Newsmaker Saturday. Thanks again to Charles Payne from the Fox Business Channel and Robert Sewell, employment attorney on COVID restrictions. We'll see you next week on Newsmaker Saturday.